Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Pokemon SoulSilver. In the last part, we finished off the Gym Leader rematches thanks to the Kanto set, and between parts, I've done some grinding to say the least. Everyone is about in their late 70s, with Blaze being the highest at 80. By the end of Mount Silver, everyone will probably be at least closer to 80, if not like Blaze being 82 or something like that, because we got a lot of random battles along the way there. You might think that's overkill, and to an extent it is. You're probably going to be fine around 75 at the earliest. But for what lies ahead of us, I wanted to make sure I was as prepared as I could be without over-leveling. The unfortunate thing about doing this game the way I am, because I want to end on a credit sequence that's not sort of redundant in what we're doing, doing all this leveling has over-leveled me for the round 2 against the Elite Four and Lance that you unlock after getting all 16 gym badges. Which is a little unfortunate, but there was no real way around that because I originally wanted what we're doing here to be the last event I did in the game. But there is 2 events that unlock after you beat what's on top of Mount Silver. So it was kind of between a rock and a hard place. So, let's just get out of this hard place and just finish off Mount Silver. With that said, Mount Silver has not really changed much since our first time here to catch the Moltres. There's some items to grab along the way, yes, but the main thing you're going to be finding here is Pokemon. Rapidashes, Doduos, Tangalas, Larvitars, Donphans, Fanfys. A lot of Pokemon you could find around Blackthorn City, as well as being the only location you could find Larvitars, Misdreavuses, and Sneasels in the original generation too. I've already said how much I don't like them doing that in the original game. I'm glad the Safari Zone's there to mitigate that nowadays, but it's still really annoying. Despite all that though, while the Pokemon here are the highest level you can find in the game, I believe, usually ranging out to their high 40s to early 50s, navigating Mount Silver itself isn't too bad. You do need Rock Climb to get anywhere here, but that's the only HM you need. You don't need Strength from memory. You need Rock Smash to get some items, and I'll be coming back here later in the LP to grab those, honestly. But the dungeon itself is pretty straightforward after the initial fork. There's a lot of dead ends, yes, but those usually at least lead to an item or two. It's kind of weird because from memory, this was I guess it was this and Gen 3 with Meteor Falls that were the only Pokemon games that had a distinct final dungeon kind of thing going on. Because yes, there's sort of the final plot dungeon thing overall in the games. Like Gen 5 has the end-game plot stuff. But when it comes to post-game, there's no real final dungeon. Whereas both this and Hoenn have a dungeon you can only really take full advantage of once you're at the end of its post-game, more or less. And something about that's really cool to me. I kind of wish they did that a little more often. Because whenever there's usually like the final post-game thing in a Pokemon game, it's usually like one last dungeon with a legendary and that's not much of note. Mount Silver rather, is a pretty big area, all things considered, even if there's not much happening in it. Same with the one from Gen 3 now that I think about it. Now, if there's something I can recommend, you may have noticed I also showed off all of my held items when I was showing off the stats earlier. If you have one at this point, give the charcoal to your fire starter, the Mystic Water, which you can find in the ocean to the west of Cherry Grove, to your water starter, and the Miracle Seed we got in your Violet City to your grass starter, because that's probably going to help you out a lot in this upcoming battle. Speaking of which, I probably should address something directly for people who are noticing it. This is the shortest part in the LP thus far. The main reason for that is I didn't want to go directly into the next thing in the LP after what we do here on Mount Silver. I wanted kind of like the video to end and to have sort of a secondary ending for the LP after the Lance battle back in part 21. So consider this sort of finale 2 of 3. We'll start in parts 39 with the first part of post game, sort of, where we're going to start focusing on a lot of the stuff I've ignored in the LP thus far, including certain locations I've barely investigated. Something I really admire about Mount Silver, especially here in the remake. They go a long way to at least give it some different aesthetics and biomes as you climb it. The higher up you get, the snowier it gets, and in its own way, a little eerier. From memory, in the original game, this place wasn't very interesting looking, because the Game Boy, great console, I love a lot of the games on it, great handheld rather, but man, it could not show things in RPGs very well. It was probably at its best graphically for platformers. Like, I'm trying to think, what do I think is like the graphical best game on the Game Boy and Game Boy Color? And I immediately think it's probably like one of the Zeldas, like Oracle of Ages or Seasons, or Metroid 2 would have helped if that got that DX version they were planning at one point or another. Is there anything else that really comes to mind? I guess one of the TMNT games my brother had growing up. I think that was Radical Rescue. I thought that looked pretty nice for the Game Boy. And clearly Rocky and Bullwinkle. Off topic, I know, but I really gotta do an LP of that someday just so I can cross it off my bucket list, because that game has haunted me since my childhood, and I've only gotten as far as maybe stage 2 or 3. I think they also add a room to this area from the original game, because I don't remember this next room being in there, period. Mind you, I don't recall Rock Climb being in the original game at all. I think Waterfall was the last HM in the original game. I think. It's been a decade since I last played any version of the original Gen 2. Before we head into that next cave right there, though, head over here for a free max revive, which is pretty nice. Alright, though. Welcome to the peak of Mount Silver. It's quiet up here. Take this moment, make any last-minute party adjustments you want. Save, especially. 70 hours in. Long LP so far, yes, but let's keep in mind that is also slightly exaggerated because of my fast-forwarding while doing any kind of level grinding. Let's see what awaits us here on the peak. It's been a long journey to get here. Let's hope it's worth it. You didn't think they brought him up at his house for nothing, did you? Final boss of the game is Red, our very own player character from any version of Generation 1 boring, let's go. And he is spouting the highest level Pokemon in the franchise. Starting off is his ace, his Pikachu. Static for its ability, Volt Tackle, Iron Tail, Quick Attack, and Thunderbolt. Holding a Light Ball, notably, which boosts the stats of any Pikachu holding it, notably doubling its special attack. So this Pikachu is here to kill. The levels were noticeably lower for all of Red's Pokemon in Gold, Silver, and Crystal, about 7 levels lower as the usual boost for Pokemon Gym Leaders, rather, in Kanto was. The main reason they boosted him in particular is because he got triumphed in main Gen 4 by Barry's later refights in the Battle Frontier area, getting a higher level than him. Next up, we got Red's Blastoise. Torrent for its ability, so in the last third or so of its health, its Hydro Cannon will do higher damage. Also has Blizzard, Flash Cannon, and Focus Blast. Focus Blast there is the big move to fear, because that is a high power move with lowish accuracy, but if that lowers your special defense by the one stage that it can, you're probably in trouble. More so than any other fight, I feel, in the series. This can exemplify how much a Pokemon is just a numbers game. You can be 10 levels lower than most of his Mon and probably be able to win, but it'll be close. And even then, at my levels, it can be close. The big thing is whether or not you've trained your Pokemon well, have a good learn set going on, and are able to react accordingly. For a lot of people, Pokemon comes down to being a guessing game, out-predicting your opponent with a move that maybe they can't do anything about, like say they're about to do a lower priority move, you can one-shot them with Quick Attack or Extreme Speed, or you can fly out of the way with your higher speed to avoid a move and reduce their PP. Red is a case where you want to be reactive. Do damage, but react to him and try to outstall him that way. This is something I'm kind of shocked they haven't done much since, though. Because the only other instance I can think of where a major trainer like this came back a generation or two later, just as a surprise fight, is a notable house in Generation 5's first entry. If you know, you know. Next up, though, Red has his Snorlax, Thick Fat for its ability, Shadow Ball, Crunch, Blizzard, and Giga Impact. The slightly annoying thing about this battle is that there is a consistent hailstorm here on the peak of Mount Silver, which can be bad for you, but it's also kind of bad for Red, to be fair, because none of his Pokemon, barring one, are immune to the hail's effects. So this could easily be as bad for him as it is for you. You can even use it to your advantage in some cases. I slightly foreshadowed it, though, back when we fought Lance in Part 21. That fight's cool, but man, I feel bad for Lance. This theme will always be associated so much more with Red because he's just such a more imposing trainer battle. Plus, it's a case like I brought up at some point in the past in the LP, I think. Red's team is what a player would make. Varied types, varied move types in every single Pokemon, varied abilities to take advantage of some of their strengths and weaknesses. This is what I like final challenges in Pokemon games to be. And some champions get it right. Blue gets it right in the original games. Leon gets it right in Gen 8 with all that game's problems. Cynthia more or less gets it right. And admittedly, the only other fight I'd say that's as interesting a final battle in the story as this one in the franchise to date, in Legends Arceus, also very much gets that right. I'd argue story-wise that is the most interesting battle in the franchise. But Red outcools that battle just by being Red. Next up, Red's sending out his Lapras. Shell Armor for its ability, Body Slam, Brine, Blizzard, and Psychic. You might notice a lot of Red's Pokemon do go for the moves that are lower accuracy but higher power, and admittedly, I've done that exact strategy before. In fact, I think I did back in my Crystal LP. But with how my luck's been over the years, in recording at least, going for the lower accuracy moves that are higher power just wasn't worth it to me this time. Could I have gone a little more out of my way to do slightly different movesets? Yes, in fact, you may have noticed my movesets are even a little different than they were last time. Like I believe at this point, Kuro has Hammer Arm or something like that. I did some minor using of TMs between parts. I think I may have even bought one or two at some places to use them, just to make sure my movesets were as optimum as I wanted them to be for this final battle. If you're new to the game and Red's kicking your ass, don't be afraid to use items. Admittedly, for years I was really bad about using items in Pokemon, but it feels like out of all the major RPG franchises, it's the one where you get punished the least for using them because more or less every item that's worth it you can buy at some point in the game. Like in a Final Fantasy, using something like a Full Restore or an Elixir is a risky move because you're not sure if you're going to be able to find one or buy one again anytime soon. In Pokemon, you can always buy more, and it's pretty easy to get money, especially with Amulet Coins, so you might as well. It's a hard battle, but there's many strategies you can take to make it easier on you, besides just grinding up levels. Because that's technically the answer to every solution, but it's not the one you should always take, you know what I mean? I remember back when I was originally going to do Fire Red, I had the word in my brain that I should just try my best to mimic this team. Like, I would use a Lapras, I would get a Pikachu, keep it a Pikachu, I would get a Snorlax, I would figure out a way that would eventually be me trading with the Leaf Green copy, probably, to get myself a Blastoise and Venusaur. The ultimate reason I didn't do that, and ultimately just went with the teams I went with in that LP, was because I would have had to play the game 3 times, honestly. Playing the game twice like I did for this, for the evolution of my Alakazam in that LP, for the Gengar in this, was more than enough for me. With that said, the next member of Red's team is his Venusaur. Overgrow for his ability, which is just Blaze and Torrent, but for grass types. Frenzy Plant, Giga Drain, Sludge Bomb, and Sleep Powder. Venusaur can be a surprisingly annoying member of this team, if only because it's the one that has the most likelihood of inflicting status ailments on you that aren't paralyzed. As being frozen by any of the 3 Blizzard users on his team isn't that big of a threat. But being pushed to sleep, poisoned by Sludge Bomb, that's a genuine threat. And that's what I mean about the hail being potentially beneficial to you. Frenzy Plant's the biggest move to fear from the Venusaur, though, because that's just a grass-type Hyper Beam, essentially. Like 150 power, 90 accuracy, but you have to recharge after using it. And the final Pokemon for Red is his Charizard. Blaze for its ability, Blast Burn, Flare Blitz, Air Slash, and Dragon Pulse. The Gen 1 favorite overall versus my favorite. Red, it's been a good battle, but it's down to this. What do you mean I'm just going to use Surf like I've basically done for half the LP? Yeah, it's powerful, I know. Kind of weird, though, mentally for me. As much as I don't like the overall focus on Gen 1 as nostalgia throughout the franchise overall, I will never mind them bringing back past characters like Red, because there's a difference between going, hey, look at all this Gen 1, remember, to being, oh, he's here. He's gonna kick your ass, good luck. I can't exactly separate why that feeling is separate in my head, though. Like, when he and Blue showed up very out of the nowhere in Gen 7, that was great. I liked that. And I like him getting a new Signa suit in Masters alongside Ash finally showing up. It's about time Ash got some amount of representation in the games because, frankly, despite not being the original trainer, you could argue he has a much more important role in the franchise's history since he's always been the star of the anime, barring some OVAs. At the end of the day, though, Red is a champion in his own right. But if you play your own cards right, you'll probably find yourself to be the bigger champion in the long run. Good game, Red. Good game. And that's the end of the post-game of Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but there's still a whole lot for us to go through. This, in comparison, for instance, is recording session 22, part 1. There are 27 recording sessions, and there's still a lot more of recording session 22 to show off. We're nowhere near done with this LP. But for those who are only here for the main playthrough, not for all like the side content I am to show it off, like In-Depth Pokeathlon, Battle Frontier, and all that, we might as well go over my thoughts on the main progression of Heart Gold and Soul Silver, I guess. I mentioned before that I'm not a big fan, several times, of the level curve in Heart Gold and Soul Silver in the original Generation 2, and Kanto in general really exemplifies that. Just having a simple direction to go and limiting where you could go in those directions probably would have made this a lot more interesting a revisit to a prior region. And no matter, because of its levels as it is, no matter which version you're playing, it just sort of melts in front of you until blue or red. And that's a shame because yes, it makes those two fights potentially much more interesting, but it just means you're just kind of wandering about, not feeling very challenged by anything for a good at least 7-8 hours. I like that Kanto is here, but I do wonder what Gen 2 would have been like as a game and difficulty curve if they had done something different in the original Generation 2 once Iwata got that really good compression system in there. If they had focused on making a much more focused game with much more interesting plot and level curve, that could have been a real great game for the Game Boy Color and a much better originally intended finale for the series, because a lot of points indicate that Generation 2 in its original release was planned to be the final Pokemon game. But then money got in the way, so they're like, nah, we'll keep making more. Heart Gold Soul Silver on the whole, I'll get more into my thoughts of once we finish up all the stuff I still have left to do. I do think it is the better game. I might as well say that now if you're trying to get into any version of Gen 2. But if I'm going to recommend a Pokemon game to play, Heart Gold Soul Silver is not in the top 5, honestly. If only because there's other games that do what this game does much more interestingly, barring the whole two regions thing. And that's mostly because I'm going to recommend basically anyone for their first Pokemon experience nowadays. Try and track down either of the Gen 5 duology, rather, because that's just the most interesting Pokemon ever got to me. But with that, in the case you were only here for the main story stuff, I want to thank y'all for coming by. Have a great night, take care, and I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. But for those of you who are going to stick with me through whatever's left in this LP, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 39, we start our final tours around Johto and Kanto to take care of whatever I haven't yet in the game. See you guys then.